Again, I want to welcome you, Mr. Scott Conrad, Oscar winner for editing the first Rocky, and also Emmy winner for the documentary he helmed beginning of the 70s on Butch Cassidy on the Sundance Kid. My first question to you was about your starts in the middle 60s. Here in your biography, it mentioned that you started in 20th Century Fox doing some publicity, starting at the billing department. But tell me, how was it for you as a young man, or for young men of your generation, to try to break through the entertainment industry at that time?
Well, wow, that's a big subject. It was wonderful, in one word, because here I was 20 years old, and I started off in the mailroom. I had wanted to be, thought I wanted to be an actor when I was younger. Did some things in school and a couple of TV things, and then gave up that idea completely. Went back to school for I was studying architecture, and gave that up when I found out how much math it was rather than art. And so I started working in 20th Century Fox. And the mailroom was, everybody kept saying, "Well, that's the best place to start. You can see everything." So I did. And then the mailroom led me to publicity in a very short period of time, like I think 6 months. And it was interesting because the senior publicist, they wanted the good jobs, right, to cover the good films. And so as the very junior guy, they gave me the bottom. And so they sent me down on the set to interview and take them people on a tour to this film set for a movie called The Sound of Music. That nobody said, "Oh, there aren't any actors in that anybody really knows or anything. Why don't you go cover that?" So of course,
Yes.
Sound of Music was the one that ended up being the biggest out of that bunch. And anyway, I kept exploring everything in the studio. And the mailroom had given me the opportunity to go to every single office, every single department. And a lot of people, I thought I wanted to be a director at that point. And a lot of people said that film editing is the best way to get to be a director. And so I said, all right, I'll try the film editor. And I very quickly found out, number one, that I loved it. And number two, that it was going to take a very long time. Because in those days, in the Editors Guild, you had to be an apprentice for a period of 8 years before you could actually edit yourself. And of
Mm-hmm.
course, after about 2 years, I got very bored with that. Knew I wanted to be in film, either director, editor, pretty much, I was sure I wanted to be an editor. And so I went back to USC. I went back to university to be able to get an education in film, the film school. And that was great. It gave me an overall view of some things. But on the other hand, here I was. I'd been in the industry around some of the top people, from Robert Wise, and I could name 20 different director producers. Some of the top people in the film industry at that point. And here I am hearing some of these teachers talk about, the theory of things. At one point, the guy asked me to leave the class because I kept bringing up very practical points that he didn't agree with. So
Yes.
anyway, so I did not quite complete my degree because I was working as an assistant editor on Butch Cassidy and Sundance Kid. Actually, I was working as an apprentice because the woman who was head of the editing department allowed me to stay on and work part-time as an apprentice so I could put myself through USC. And the editor got fired. And they moved the assistant editor up to editor and asked me if I wanted to be the assistant. Well, that was something that was like almost unheard of that quickly. So I jumped at it. I said yes, but it meant I had to leave the university. So
Yes.
anyway, and while I was working on that film, they went on location to Butch Cassidy. They went on location to Colorado and to Mexico. And one of my really good friends, Ron Priceman, went with them as assistant to the director, to George Roy Hill. And George Roy had a 16 millimeter Bolex camera with a one lens, a 12 to 120 Angino zoom lens. And Ronnie started filming things with it. And he'd send it back, send the 16 millimeter back to me, because of course the big main film was being shot on 35 millimeter. And I started putting things together. And Ronnie had never filmed anything really before in his life, but the cinematographer was one of the best guys of all time, Conrad Hall. And Connie started showing Ronnie, giving him tips about what to film and how to film it and all that kind of stuff. So he continued, and I'd say, like, well, why don't you get an interview with Redford and with Catherine Ross? And, you know, so it just grew and grew, and it became the making of Butch Cassidy, Sundance Kid, and it won an Emmy for Best Documentary, and I almost got kicked out of the Editors Guild because of it, because
Yes.
you know, here I was, I had edited something. Not only had I broken that rule, I think I'd only been in the union 4 years at that point. And not only had I edited something, but it won an award, it won an Emmy. So they were not real happy about it. And so I had to go up before the board and explain that it was originally supposed to be an educational film, and da 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 da. They gave me a hand spanking and told me not to do it again, which of course I did. I was really hooked on film editing, loved it, and I still do.
Yes, yes.
The real beauty of answering your question too was that
Yes,
I was very fortunate, because that was sort of the beginning of the end of the studio system, of the old way. And the beginning of the Butch Cassidy and Sundance Kid was, although it was a studio film, it broke a lot of rules, from the use of zoom lenses for Western, a lot of things. And it was the beginning of a real change from the old studio system to the independent and a different way of filmmaking. And it was great to be able to see this. The studio was, in those days, when you made a film at a studio like 20th Century Fox, you had everything at your disposal. Like for the shot in Butch Cassidy and Sundance Kid, where they jump off the oh shit scene, where they jump off the cliff.
yes,
I was fortunate enough to be able to walk over to the special effects department with George Roy Hill and Conrad Hall, and talk to Bill Abbott, who had won several Academy Awards for visual effects, and discuss the best way to shoot this. And he said, okay, you take this and you put a plate here and you shoot the jumping off the rock there, and you do a shot of the, laid it out to George Roy and Conrad Hall exactly how to do the shot. So you have everything at your disposal. You have everything in camera, sound, some of the best people. It was like a filmmaker's dream to be able to work like that. So anyway, it was wonderful. It was magical. I got to go on a lot of previews with people and see the audience response. It was wonderful.
yes. I want to ask you about how did you being selected to join the editing team of Rocky. And I want to mention that in the 70s, I noted Metro Mayer and United Artists. I think they achieved a peak of that time. They were producing a lot of good films. Being born 1971, but later on Turner Classics, a lot of real quality films were produced at MGMUA. The time of the Rocky production, and especially with the producer Winkler and Chertoff. So, what can you tell me about your experience? Joining Rocky and Metro Goldwyn Mayer United Artists at that time.
Well, it was, of course, it was the first, as far as being an editor, it was one of the first big things I did, and it wasn't a big thing. Chartoff Winkler had 3 films going at the time. They had Rocky, which was the lowest of the 3 as far as budget and what the image at that point was. They had another movie called Nickelodeon, which was about 8 million, and they were shooting New York, New York, which of course pretty much a lot of people know about New York, New York. That was 12 million. Rocky, the budget was 1.2, between 1.2 and 1.3 million. So it was the cheap one, and of course everybody knows how it turned out. But I was one of my best friends, and somebody I had worked with and known, and actually we've been roommates at one point. Richard Halsey, he had started on Rocky, and he went back to Philadelphia with them, where they were shooting, and he was. It's very difficult to edit when you're on location back, especially with film back in those days, with logistics and if you're on the set a lot. So Dick didn't get an opportunity to cut very much by the time he got back. So he came back in January of '76 and called me up. And he said, "We've got all this footage. I haven't been able to do that much. Can you come in and help me?" I said, "Absolutely, love to." Send me the script. I read the script and I'm going, I'm there. And they started me off because the fight, they knew how they had a ton of footage. There was 84,000 feet of film, and it had been shot with 6 cameras. So it was a lot of film in those days. And so they asked me if I would start with that. And I said, yeah, sure. And said, how long is this going to take? I said, well, let me take a look at the film first, but my feeling is probably going to be about 3 weeks to get a good first cut. So anyway, I plunged into the film. And of course, those days being on film, I was using a Moviola and a Kim, which is a flatbed editing table. And every week the Chartoff Winkler would call us and say, well, how much longer for the fight? And I said, it's going to be the 3 weeks. So anyway, finally, at the end of the time, we showed them that cut. And I used some rock music for it. I used Bad Blood, Bad Company was the rock tune I used. And of course, Chartoff and Winkler were a little put off by that, but they knew what we had. And of course, eventually, that's what happened with Bill Conti, is that the Chartoff and Winkler wanted more of a rock kind of contemporary score, and some of the other powers that be, the director, wanted more of a classical kind of.
Yes.
So what happened? Bill Conti really did the perfect marriage between the two, and the result was wonderful. So that was pretty much it. I went through right up to the time we were ready to lock the picture, and nobody really knew. I don't think. I mean, we knew we had something pretty good, but you never really know how the audience is going to take it. But we knew we had something pretty darn good when we showed it to the Academy, which was in the fall of '76, and it got a standing ovation. And to get a standing ovation for the Academy it doesn't happen all the time. So we were very, very pleased and thought, okay, we got something good.
Right now, I want to ask you, technically speaking, when you see the fighting scenes in Rocky, I think the filmmakers, they adapted this new style of shooting.
You just dropped out. Hello? This might be the cell phone. Hello, hello. Your picture isn't moving, and I can't hear anything. All right, like I said, it could be the cell phone. We don't get great coverage here. Yep. You just Am I rejoining here?
Yes. Yes, today a lot of technical difficulties.
There you are. There you are.
Yes, yes. I'm asking you, Mr. Conrad, about the technique of Rocky. The filmmakers. I want to ask you, was it John G. Avildsen idea to film the fighting scene using multi-camera like we used to watch on television, you know? And of course, uh, and uh, and this technique, you know, was a challenge for you to work with as an editor, you know, because you have you know, a lot of footage, multiple angles, and to synchronize it as well with the Bill Conti music. Tell me, how was the process to harmonize and synchronize all of these elements together?
Well, multiple camera shoots for action were pretty well established by that point in time, 1976. So it wasn't a big deal, and especially John Avildsen was, his main forte was not action, and he felt very much more comfortable be able to have enough cameras to be able to cover everything. And of course, probably a lot of people know that the Steadicam was one of the first movies that it was ever used on, and they also only had 3 days in that auditorium, and so multiple camera was really, to get everything they needed of a 15-round fight, was pretty necessary. So anyway, it was fun, I'll tell you that. But it was also, when you launch into something like that, it can be rather daunting, because you see you got all this stuff. And in those days, I mean, unlike today with digital, in those days on film, you'd have to load up. I had a Kem, the Kem I was using, KEM. Probably a lot of people don't know what they are today. There was the 2 flatbeds were a Kem and a steam bag. And I had 3 picture heads. So I'd load up 3,000-foot rolls of 35 millimeter and 1 soundtrack. And you go through and find the best pieces and mark them. And I still, at that point in time, was using a Moviola, because it was far and away the most precise way to edit, because you stop, you hit that break, and you stop right on the frame. Even whether it was the Kim, even today with digital, I've had to adapt, and when I switched to digital in '93, I had to adapt to a different way of editing, because it does not stop exactly on the frame. There's just a little bit of a lag, slight bit, but the Moviola, boom, right on the frame. So I would take the pieces off the editing table, the Kim table, and hang them and organize them, and then edit them with the Moviola. So it was cumbersome. It was great fun. It was one of the beauties of film, was it was very physical. You were touching, holding the film, looking at it, and a Moviola. I once had a bet with a director. This was back late '90s, when I said that the Moviola still had the best image of any of the medium, the editing medium. And he couldn't believe me. And I said, we had to go find a Moviola and find a good piece of 35 millimeter to put in the gate. And he said, my God, you're right. It is, because you're actually taking the film and putting it right there and showing it through the shutter. So yes. It was beautiful. But anyway, it was very physical. It was good. It was daunting. And just, you do it.
Yes, I remember we had a Moviola. I worked in Metro Golden Mayer office in Cairo 30 years ago. We had the Metro Cinema in Cairo and another one in Alexandria, and we used to have like at the offices above the cinema. We used to have the the 35 millimeter store. And we had a Moviola, because sometimes you need to fix some cuts in the film, put it on a big reel for the projector in the cinema. And Let me say that also when I was young, I used to have, I still have it, an 8 millimeter cinema. And I think for an editor or a fan, the touch of a film itself, it's something else, correct?
Yes, it
In
is.
your hand.
Yeah, it is.
Yes.
Actually, I had a lot of editors wore gloves. I wore a white
Uh-huh.
cotton glove on my left hand because you could actually get like paper cut kind of thing. But you
Yes.
also did it to try and keep the film clean, because that was one of the difficulties. Of course, the longer that you're editing, working with the film, the more it piles
Uh-huh.
up with dirt and scratches and all that. So I
Hmm.
was usually pretty careful with that.
Yes. Tell me, Mr. Conrad, were you asked to return as an editor for the sequels of Rocky, or it was a decision from your side because you won the Oscar for the first one? You wouldn't go back and repeat yourself.
I'm not quite sure. I'm not following the question. Can you repeat?
Yes, I will repeat it. I will repeat. I was asking you, were you being asked to return as an editor for the sequels of Rocky? You
Oh
know,
no, I was not. I was
uh,
not. And
uh,
neither was Richard Halsey. Neither of us were. Stallone, he sort of took over as director from that point on, and
yes,
from two and three on, and uh, no,
yes,
which was sort of it was a little unusual, but
unusual.
I moved
Yes,
on. Richard moved on.
yes. But tell me, how was Stallone at the beginning? Because I watched the Oscars, when Rocky won several Oscars, yourself and John G. Avildsen. And I think Stallone at that time was a very humble young man. How do you
Yeah,
describe his character?
yeah.
Because at that time.
Well, you're 100% correct. Yeah, Stallone was when we were doing Rocky. He was very humble.
Mhm.
He was a good guy. He was very prolific. He had a lot of good script ideas. He and Richard Halsey, they went together. They went through Lamaze, and birthed their children during that time. And anyway, I liked them a lot, and it's we'll leave that where it is.
Yes. But tell me, sir, you won an Oscar at a young age, nearly after a few years of your beginning as a professional editor. And I hear many of the actors or maybe other filmmakers who won the Oscar at an early age, they say in their interview that they have prefer to want it later on in their career after they achieved something 20 or 30 years of your career. What is your opinion on that?
I think that whenever you win it is, you're fortunate. I mean,
Yes.
I mean, whatever. I mean, I wouldn't say that. I would never change that history in any way, and I wouldn't question it. Opportunities come when they come, and I will say this: it did affect me, and I think my head got a little bit big from that for a
Uh-huh.
period of time, and I had to come back down to earth,
Yes.
and as it did with Stallone, and
Yes.
it is a humbling. It's first of all, it's like wow. As I said on the stage, this is truly the dream of a lifetime come true. Because I never imagined that I would, I wanted to be an actor, and then I wanted to be an editor and director. I never imagined I would get an Academy Award, and so
Hmm.
I don't know. Anybody says that they'd rather get it later. I don't know. I think that's a little. I would.
Hmm.
It's a little suspect.
Yes. Yes. But tell me, sir, after
Well,
Rocky,
the only thing I'll say about
if,
that is just
please.
what I
Hmm.
was saying was that maybe because you would appreciate it more, you would have learned more, and it wouldn't go to your head as much. Maybe that's what they're talking about.
Yes. But tell me, sir, when I see the list of the films you have edited after Rocky, I've seen you work both television and both cinema. I don't know about editors in the United States, but are some editors can be selective. They say no, I only work on feature films during that time, or it depends. Like they say, okay, it's an editing job, and this is my job. I can do it both for cinema and television, because before, not like now, we have, the streaming service and everything. The two medium are coming together, cinema and cable and everything. What is your take on that? Your personal opinion?
Well, it was very easy. It was very easy to get pigeonholed. It was very easy to put into one category. And
Yes.
I did the first TV thing I did before I got the award for Rocky. I did it in '76, a little TV movie called Lucan.
Yes.
And I did that because it was at MGM, and the director was a very good director, a feature film director. And I looked at it as an opportunity to sort of broaden the scope. Now, I did not go back into it for a while because I had heard and talked to a lot of other editors and people and agents that it was very easy to get typecast. Just and once you stay in television, you're going to stay there. You're not going to make that break in the features. So I stayed away from it for quite a bit of time. Mm-hmm. And then when things slowed down, there was a period of time in the early '80s when cassettes just came in, and
of course,
the film industry, and they weren't making as much features for a while, especially in the category where I was working. I was sort of in mid-level budgets rather than huge budgets and low budget at that point.
Yes.
And so a lot of that went away in that early '80s or '80s or slowed down. So at that point, I got offered some very premium TV movies by top TV directors. And so I said, all right, I'll go try this. It's another challenge. And so I did that for a little bit. And I would go back into it if I had a break in between films. But it was anyway, the problem with TV, everybody pretty much knows it's the same or worse now, is that you're stuck to such a time frame.
Yes.
And that it was in commercials. I'm just eating it up today. It's like, even I was watching some of the Olympics the other night. My God, what they're doing with commercials now is just it's obscene. I mean, 2/3 of the screen was taken up with commercials while
all the time. Yes.
But when I started the first TV movie I did, I think you had 97 minutes worth of screen time, film time, and then it kept dropping to 96 and 90. Finally got down to 89 minutes, and the rest was taken up with commercials for a 2-hour TV movie. But anyway, the TV was okay, but it was more a filler than anything else.
Yes, and I think Lucan, it was about a young man who has some kind of werewolf capabilities. Was it this one? Or something else?
Yes, right. Well,
yes, because I watched the TV series when I was young in the '80s. It came in Egypt. I remember it. It was developed into a television series after the first pilot you have edited, I think.
Yeah, it wasn't. It wasn't about a werewolf. No, it was based on a true story.
Yes,
a true story about a young boy that was abandoned and raised by wolves, and then how trying to fit him back into society, and it was a movie version of that true story.
Yes, and tell me, sir, a lot of the great filmmakers, they say they have an editor inside them. I remember seeing documentaries about Hitchcock, about how he designed the scenes, how he used storyboards, and I think Spielberg do the same. Right now they do it on computers. Doing animation prep for the scene, stuff like that. I want to ask you, did you ever think of directing a feature yourself after all this experience?
Yes, I did. I mean, I went into it thinking that's what I was going to end up doing. And, then you're working at editing and you're trying to build your reputation in that. And then after Rocky, I I thought about it even more. But
Yes.
it's like it was difficult to make that break. And the more I got into it, the more I got better at it. I just said, I think I'd rather be the best at what I do than rather trying to make that jump to director at this point. And I think I'm going to stick with a couple of very good editors had made that jump. Although in the old days that was the best way to come, but a couple of editors that I knew tried that, and it hurt terribly because then when they wanted to go back into editing, it was more difficult to get the good jobs.
Of course.
A case in point was Lou Lombardo. Lou Lombardo was an incredibly good editor, and probably my style is closer to his than anybody else. And he edited The Wild Bunch amongst a bunch of other films, and he tried to be a director. He did a couple of small films, and then people were thinking like, well, what, you couldn't make it there, and now you want to come back into editing, and he did, but it wasn't quite the same, And
Yes.
so it was like, I don't think so. I think I'm going to stick with what I do well.
Yes. Yes. And tell me, sir, how did you manage to adapt yourself into the editing technology? For instance, recently you have edited a trilogy, Rogue Warfare,
Right.
and of course many films, and you have edited, I think, all kind of genres, thrillers, comedy, drama, everything. But tell me, how did you manage to adapt yourself into the technology and the requirement of the current industry?
Well, when you're saying the technology, you mean the editing itself, or you're talking about the difference between, the film mediums?
Of course, between film and digital, which is currently, I think, the dominating element in editing right now. You shoot in digital and you edit on digital right now.
Right. Well, that of course, the first transition. The first thing I tried with a non-linear editing system was called the Edit Droid. It was something that Lucas came up with back in the late 70s, and it was a disaster. I thought it was awful. It never really went anywhere. Then there was a second thing that I tried for TV movies because they were always looking for a less expensive way to do it, and that was called the montage. And the montage system you had another room that was full of beta tape machines that were all trying to access the thing and come back to it. And it was quite cumbersome, but it was better. I said, okay, they're getting close. And then I did the first thing on Avid. I saw it, went to the Editors Guild for a training session to see what it was all about. And I thought, it's got a possibility. But so there was a 3-day training course that the Editors Guild put on. And the first day when I did it, working with a computer, not having the moviola break in my hand and being able to control the film and doing it and through a whole different technical. It was the first day. After the first day, I said, I don't know if I can do this. I don't know if I like this. And a lot of editors bailed and didn't go on if they were older. They couldn't handle it. Day 2, I was sort of starting to catch on, but it was still, I don't know if I want to do this. Day 3, okay, I got the idea. I got the principle down, and I think I can do this. And so I did a TV movie actually. So I didn't want to sign on to a big feature.
Yes.
With something I was just trying, and I knew they probably wouldn't be real patient with me. But so I being sort of a big fish in a small pond at that point with a TV movie, I got one, and I said, look, I want to make this switch. I want to do this on the Avid. And they said, well, you think you can do it? I said, yeah, I think I can, but you got to give me a really good assistant that's technically accomplished. And they did. And so by the time I finished that, I knew how to do it, because the assistant helped me through. He constantly showing me this and this and this. It was a learning process, but you know what? It was wonderful. And I actually did it. I worked on a film. There were 4 editors on one that they called me in to do with Sister Act 2, and they had started it on film, and it was oh my God! The director shot 800,000 feet of film. and it was every musical sequence. Every musical sequence had 40,000 feet of film. So I told them, I said, God, guys, we gotta. To the other three editors, I'm saying we gotta change. We gotta convert to this to Avid. I mean, I tell you, it'd be so much quicker and better. And they thought about it, and a couple of them were interested, but the studio, the director was like, no, we're too far into this. We don't want to switch. So that was the last film thing I did, and then I went to do one of the films that probably the two films that were the most difficult experiences in my film career was Wagons East, which I went off to do.
Of course.
For a lot of reasons. It was originally started out when I signed on, and I have to say, it was one of the funniest scripts I ever read in my entire life. It could have been wonderful, and it was supposed to be John Candy and Dan Aykroyd at that point, and Aykroyd bailed like a month before it was going to start shooting, and Aykroyd signed up for it, and the director just, let's say, comedy was really not his strong point. And he and Candy did not get along. And Candy showed up weighing 375 pounds. And he'd be sitting on the horse in the sun for hours while they're trying to get everything worked out, which was not happy. He left the film 3 times and flew back to LA. We were in Durango, Mexico. And so it was, and then about halfway through, I mean, everybody pretty much knows he died. Now I got a call very early in the morning. He said, could you come on in to the office? So I come in and they say, John Candy died last night. What do we do? And they're asking me what to do because we're there in Mexico on location. I said, well, you got 3 choices. Either you can scrap it or you just fold up and go home. I mean, really, we're halfway through. Or you can recast it and we can reshoot the parts that he was in and try to take it from there. Or you can rewrite, and somebody else actually probably rewrite the script to be able to fit these other characters, these other actors. And then they brought in Richard Lewis to do, the part. And, Richard Lewis is a great comedian and all that, but it wasn't the same as having John Candy. And so anyway, that was extremely difficult because now here you got a film. And you've still got to do the final cut.
Yes.
Then you got to do the score and the music, and you've got the visual effects. I was trying to put John Candy, and the visual effects then weren't what they are now.
Of course.
And I was trying to put him on the back of a horse, take him out of something else, and fitting on, so you thought he was crossing the river, and at the bar. And anyway, it was painful. It was really painful. And talking about technology too, I had decided on that one because the other editing system at that point that they were really trying to tout was called Lightworks. And the Lightworks, so I said, all right, the woman who was in charge of post for Corelco, the producing company, said, all right, yeah, let's try Lightworks. So they were pushing it, and they were going to give a lot of the equipment for not much money. And so they made a huge mistake over money. A production person did, where it was supposed to come down air freight to Durango, Mexico. And instead, they decided to save some money and ship it by truck. Well, let's just say that machine did not do well on a truck. And by the time it got there, it didn't work, to put it bluntly. And so they had to fly people down from Hollywood to come and try to make it work. And storage was, the storage, like media storage, was so much more cumbersome at that point. Today, what you can fit, you can put 10 terabytes on a little drive, and then it was like a big CPU for 64 gigs. So anyway, a lot of technical problems. It didn't quite work very well. You've got to finish this film. It's never going to be the same. It's not going to be what you started out thinking it was going to be, but you got to complete it. And it was painful. It was a painful experience. And then when we got back to Hollywood with it, and we're editing there, the Lightworks still wasn't working well. I got so mad at it at one point. CNN came in to do a an interview because of Candy dying, that we're back trying to make something out of the film. And I had taped, I took a piece of tape and wrote Might Works on it and put it across the front of the machine, right? They came in, CNN filmed that. And when that got back to Lightworks, they went berserk, you know. And of course, they were coming in at night. I'd finish work at 7 o'clock. They'd come in at 7 and work all night long trying to get it to work.
Yes.
Yeah. So that whole experience was painful.
Yes, I remember in Egypt as well, one of our leading stars, passed away while filming, and they finished the film with a body double, and they hide his face. They did, reverse shots, and they dubbed his voice later on. And final thing, Mr. Scott. I want to ask you, have you ever had the chance of meeting John Wayne, and what can you tell us about his character?
No, I never met him. I wish I had. When I went to USC, I joined a fraternity for a while, Sigma Chi, and Duke had been a Sig at USC also and played football there.
Yes.
And so our house, the fraternity, would have a big dinner on Sunday nights. And often different people would stop by that were alumni.
Yes.
And he came by 3 times, so I was at school there, and I was never there for dinner that night. And also when he was shooting Comancheros at Fox, of course he was on location most of the time. I was also working at Fox, and I didn't get to meet him then.
Yes.
I wish I had. He's one of my huge heroes, and I had broken all relationships with USC because of the way that they have treated his legacy.
Yes.
I don't know how public knowledge it is, but the Wayne family contributed a huge amount of memorabilia and stuff to USC. They had a display in the cinema department upstairs, second story. You had to make an appointment to go see it, and somebody walked by, saw it, and said they were offended by it. And one person taking offense at the works of someone who was one of the most wonderful film stars and people of all time, and they fought off the complaints for about a year, but they finally succumbed, and they took all of the memorabilia out, got rid of the museum, and that was the first peg. And then the second peg, because I was very close to football. I mean, it's been since I went to USC in 1966 and 67. Most people that know you tell me I was a diehard USC fan. I went to every home game and supported the school in a lot of ways. And the second thing was Duke established the John Wayne Football Scholarship and seeded it with money way back a long time ago. It had grown to a $250,000 endowed scholarship for the player that got the John Wayne Scholarship. And the Trojan Football Alumni Club that had that scholarship were told by the administration that if it had John Wayne's name on it, they wouldn't accept it anymore. And I think that was just one of the most disgusting, ridiculous, cowardly things that I've ever seen. So I have nothing to do with USC anymore.
Yes. Final question, Mr. Scott. Your advice to young people from the new generation who like to venture into the profession of editing. What can you tell them? How can they start?
Start at the bottom. Start through friends or through any way that you can get in. Do it. And if you got to carry if you got to do the technical part, if you got to do anything, do it, because if you have a knack for it, if you like editing, if you like the idea that these people make a film, and anywhere from low budgets to whatever, $1.5 million, $2 million and now the mega budget, they shoot all of this, let's call it film. They shoot all this footage, And here you've got this huge puzzle, and it comes to you, and you have to put together all these pieces, and it's wonderful. If you like puzzle, if you like problem solving, then it's one of the most rewarding, fun things that you can imagine, and it's worth every bit of trouble that you got to try to do it.
For an editor, it is important for him. I mean, education of the history of cinema. I mean, reading about old films and watching old films to come up with his own technique is important for him. An education, of film history, or it is enough for him to start with his own hands.
I'm sorry. You ask the question again? Maybe
I will rephrase it. I was asking you, Mr. Conrad, is it important for a new film editor, a young man or a young woman, to educate himself watching old films and reading about cinema history, or it is more important for him or her to start editing, and practice, and starting to learn practically?
You do both. You do both. There's nothing not to be gained by watching all the best. But I mean, I have to tell you, you can call me an old fogey, but I still think that the older movies are the story, the writing,
yes,
the simplicity of telling a story are so much better in the older films. They really are. And of course, I still have an opinion. One of the golden ages of film was from the mid 60s through the mid to late 70s. I think so many great films that were made in that period of time. And after that, I think it really, the film industry declined as far as how many great films might be turned out in a year.
Yes.
But yeah, I mean, the films from where you're talking film noir, where you're talking, it just great films. Study the best directors, whether it's Hitchcock or John Ford. John Ford, of course, to me is one of the top guys. And watch what they did, the simplicity of what they did, and at the same time, you have to educate yourself in all aspects of it. It's just film is wonderful, and so just get into every bit of it that you can.
Very good. Mr. Conrad, I want to thank you very much for joining me, and sorry for the technical difficulties, but I'm sure a lot of people will be very happy to see you and hear you and know about your experience. And I think it will inspire a lot of filmmakers, either they want to venture into editing or writing or anything related into creativity.
Yeah, I mean, film school is very good for an overall look at it, but there's still the practical thing where you got to get in and do the real deal. Cut anything you can. The students are doing a film, get in and cut that. Anybody goes off to make a short, just get involved in it in every way you can.
Yes, thank you, sir. I want to thank you very much. It is a really great pleasure for me having this conversation live with you. And let's keep in touch. And I hope to see you in one of our festivals in Egypt, to give you a tribute that you deserve.
All right. I'd love to.
Thank you, sir. Have a lovely rest of the evening. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.